The NFL schedule has officially been released, which means we now know the matchups in week 1 of the 2025 NFL season. In this video, I will pick each week 1 game and give you my spread pick for each matchup. I know it's way too early, but I'm giving you my preview, my prediction. So if that sounds good, Gronk, spike the like button. Let me know in the comments who you think will win in week 1. And let's get to it. Let's break down every week 1 matchup, the storylines, the individual matchups, and what I believe will happen in week 1. Let's begin with the kickoff game of the 2025 NFL season. That is the Dallas Cowboys at the Philadelphia Eagles, with the Super Bowl champs revealing that sweet banner and flashing their Super Bowl rings in the faces of their biggest rival, the Dallas Cowboys. I love this matchup to kick off the season. It's America's team, the most popular team in football. No matter how you slice it, the Dallas Cowboys against the best team in football. It's going to make for great ratings. And I actually believe the Cowboys are sneaky entering the season. They have upgraded wide receiver big time by adding George Pickens. And I'm really excited to see CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens together, especially against what was the best defense of last season in the Philadelphia Eagles. On top of that, I feel like the Cowboys pass rush against this offensive line is a marquee matchup to watch. Micah Parsons, Odighizuwa, you add a fresh second round pick, Enzaraku from Boston College out there as well. Dante Fowler, who just had 10 plus sacks in Washington last season. Like, there are some great matchups. Even the receivers of the Eagles versus the corners of the Cowboys, just some phenomenal football that will be played. Also, our first chance to watch a Kellen Moore-less Jalen Hurts and this offense, and also a Schottenheimer-led Cowboy team and a Matt Eberflus-led Cowboy defense. I think this game will actually be pretty competitive and pretty close. That's my expectation. I think that the Eagles will be trying to run the football, establish their ground and pound, and try to physically dominate and wear down the Cowboys. And I think that might eventually take toll in the fourth quarter. But I think in the first 3 quarters, we're going to get a pretty close game. I think the Eagles defensively will be adjusting to their rotation of edge rushers, to the loss of guys like in the secondary, Darius Slay, that just calming voice, that veteran, right? Holding it back there for communication purposes and just overall solid play. And then you also have to deal with the loss of Milton Williams, right? The loss of Josh Sweat. These are key players that they're going to have to replace. And obviously, they did make some pretty impressive draft picks in the first 2 rounds. And I wouldn't be shocked if Campbell, right, played right away and he started. I wouldn't be surprised if they had a rookie starting at safety. So that could be good. That could also take some time. Either way, I think Dak and CeeDee Lamb and this Cowboy offense, because of their familiarity and their chemistry, although it's a new coach and maybe a slightly different philosophy, I do think Schottenheimer brings a more talented and interesting running game to the table. That's kind of what he's known for. But I do think this is going to be a pass-first team. And I wouldn't be shocked that if Dak started off this season pretty hot and was throwing the ball around the yard against Philadelphia, especially because it's not going to be bad weather or anything like that. So I wouldn't really be shocked if CeeDee Lamb had a good game, if George Pickens made some plays, if Ferguson got involved, and if they found a way to get their young, fresh running backs like Blue and Space in the screen game. Like, I wouldn't be shocked if the Cowboys put up some points and moved the ball, especially in the first half of this game. And then I think that the Eagles, just from a physical standpoint, will eventually wear down the Cowboys defense. I think that the Cowboys defense is fast, and I definitely feel like the Cowboys defense can get to the quarterback, but this is the offensive line to slow them down. This is the offensive line to kind of be able to just dominate them and physically manhandle them. And then you've got to deal with all the weaponry that they do bring to the table. But I'm really intrigued by Eberflus, his game plan in week 1 against Jalen Hurts, and what they try to throw out there. I just ultimately think that the Eagles' offense will be too physically dominant, even if they don't have a deep bag of tricks, or even if they don't have a deep bag in terms of their passing game or anything, because this is a new coordinator, right? This is the first week of a new play caller, so that might be a little tricky for them. But I think eventually Saquon will take his toll, and I think eventually the Eagles will win. But honestly, I would take the 7 points at this point. I think this game will be pretty close. It kind of does remind me a little bit of the Bucs and the Cowboys back in 2021, where the Bucs won the Super Bowl and then they faced the Cowboys, a team that people felt like was maybe not that good or like average, but maybe a little sneaky, right, entering that season. And then I kind of feel the same way this year with the Cowboys, especially considering the weaponry now at wide receiver with Pickens and Lamb. That could be pretty interesting, and they could put up some points. So I think this game could be pretty close, which I think is going to be very entertaining for football fans out there kicking off the season. You never know, too. Penalties. There could be a lot of penalties in this game in an opener. There could be some sloppiness. There could be some missed tackles. A lot of these players don't play in the preseason, so all those things have to be considered as well. I will say the Eagles do have more depth, which will be useful in week 1 because players aren't quite conditioned the same. So I will say the Eagles win because of the way they perform in the second half, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Cowboys did play a competitive first half. Our second matchup is the Friday night special in Brazil. This is the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Chargers. The Chiefs are slight favorites, 2.5-point favorites. The total is 44.5. I do lean slightly towards the Chiefs, but I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers won. I just think that the Chiefs, with a full offseason to prepare for any game, I'm going to lean in that direction with Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. And given their bandwidth, like their understanding of their deep playbook, like they can call upon things from 5-6 years ago that they can use in this game against this defense. They're now going to have a full season of tape of Minter's Chargers defense that I felt like was more a well-refined coached unit last year than it was super talented. So I think they will be able to find some advantages. I do wonder if the Chargers pass rush can take advantage of a little bit of an underwhelming Chief offensive line, and definitely an offensive line that will have to build chemistry because they'll have a new left tackle regardless of who they choose. They'll have a new left guard, so their entire left side of their line will be a little suspect. The Chargers, I also think, will try to run the ball, and if they can run the ball, I think they could win this game. That's going to be the area that they can take advantage of the Chiefs. There are some spotty starters for the Chiefs on the defensive front, and there's definitely going to be some chemistry and some, like I said with the first game, some conditioning with guys like Chris Jones. Like, he's not going to be able to play out there every single snap, right? So they're going to be able to take advantage, George Karlaftis, same thing, take advantage of that rotation. And the Chiefs, I feel like they have some solid defensive linemen, but I don't think that it's like anything special. And the Chargers do have a new offensive line. Mekhi Becton added to the mix is really going to add that power and that movement to the running game. And I'm really excited to see Hampton in his first action. Then you've got Najee Harris added to the mix as well. So I could see the Chargers going with a ground and pound approach, while I could see the Chiefs going with a lot of quick passing game and putting the ball in the hands of Patrick Mahomes and letting their receivers really shine. Hollywood Brown, a full offseason to work with Mahomes, right? Worthy entering year 2 could have a really special first game here. And Rashee Rice still working his way back from injury. Might be a little slow, but still, he's going to be on the field. Travis Kelce can always be reliable as well. The area I'd be concerned about the Chiefs is the running game. I don't know if they're going to get a lot going in the running game early in this season. It might take some time for their offensive line. And late last year, they could barely run the ball at all. Like, they were super one-dimensional. So that's concerning, but I think the Chiefs will look to throw the ball. I think the Chargers will look to run the ball a lot, especially considering the Chiefs' secondary strength. And, just it's an easy way to approach the first game of the season. And then you never know, like, could Harris pop onto the scene as a rookie and make some plays? Could Quentin Johnston make a jump? Lad McConkey, we know, is talented, right? But who else is going to step up for the Chargers in the passing game? I feel like I need to see it before I believe it. And that's maybe the difference for me between these two teams. The Chiefs have more playmakers at wide receiver. I trust the Chiefs defense in like a big spot in this game a little bit more than I trust the Chargers. The Chargers are a little bit more bend but don't break, while the Chiefs are a little bit more, we're going to take it to you. We're going to blitz you on a big down. We're going to create a sack. We're going to create a pressure. And Mahomes and Herbert, there's just that slight difference between that big third down or big fourth down play that Mahomes seemingly has the edge in. But I wouldn't be shocked if the Chargers just early in the season, ball controlled, had a really nice game plan against Mahomes, and the Chiefs weren't really able to control the running game of this game on both sides, and the Chargers were able to squeak one out. But I do think the Chiefs ultimately, with their preparation, couple new plays up the sleeve of Andy Reid, he's always good in week one, so I think the Chiefs will win this game and cover. It's only 2.5. The next game is the Arizona Cardinals and the New Orleans Saints. This will be the first Sunday action for week one. The Cardinals are 4.5-point favorites on the road at the Saints. The total is low. It's 41.5, and I think that's because of the improvements the Cardinals have made on defense, and because we don't know who the quarterback of the Saints is, and it's probably going to be a rookie that's never started a game in Tyler Shuck. So that does make sense, a low total here, but it isn't a dome. So consider that. And there's also a lot of new pieces for the Cardinals defensively, and there's also just not generally a very good defense for the Saints. Now, the Saints should be a little bit better early in the year defensively because they're an old defense, so wear and tear has not set in yet, but this one, I'm leaning towards Cardinals to win, Cardinals to cover, because I don't really have any trust in the Saints quarterback situation. They have a first-time head coach that's very difficult to win in week one. They have first-time coordinators as well. That's a really tough situation against a Cardinals team that's talented and does have a lot of chemistry offensively, right? They'll be able to run the ball, I think, a little bit. Kyler Murray is always a tough dimension, especially early in the season because of the new play calls and the new little subtle shifts that offenses make with him every single year, like just a couple extra things that they can add on to his plate. Marvin Harrison has a point to prove against a really bad secondary for the Saints, might be the worst cornerback group in football. Trey McBride's always a problem, and James Conner fresh after an offseason, that's a pretty big problem as well. So I just like the Cardinals entering this year to be able to possess the ball, to be able to move the ball, to be able to have a lot of chemistry on offense. And then defensively, I think that with their new pieces, a lot of them are veterans like Josh Sweat, Calais Campbell, Dalvin Tomlinson. They've played in the NFL before. This is not going to really catch them off guard, right? The subtleties might be a little off for them, but I feel like Gannon will have them ready to go. So I like the Cardinals here to go to New Orleans to win this game, to cover. I think it's a pretty big mismatch at quarterback. It's a pretty big mismatch in terms of organization and chemistry on both sides of the ball. The Saints are working in new offensive lines, new offensive line rotation and depth chart. There's a lot of reasons to fade the Saints in week one. So I like the Cardinals here. Then we have the New York Giants at the Washington Commanders. This game is a total of 45.5, and the Commanders are favored by 7. I have to lean towards the Commanders, but I actually like the 7 with the Giants. I think the Giants will cover this number. I think the Commanders are going to be a team that are going to be playing a lot of close games. Some of them can go their way. Some of them might not go their way this year. But I think the Commanders as a roster are a little bit overrated. I think the Giants as a roster are a little bit underrated. That being said, I think the ultimate difference in this game is the Commanders are at home and they have the much better quarterback. So I will lean towards the Commanders to win. But 7 is a lot in a division rivalry game with a Giants team that has a lot to prove. And when you look at their roster, I mean, bar for bar, player for player, they might be more talented than the Commanders. Their offensive line is probably the direction where you lean towards the Commanders. But defensively, I mean, look at that front 7 that's going to be chasing around Jaden Daniels. Like, you've got Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns. You add a second-round pick to the mix. You've got Abdul Carter, who's an absolute stud. Kayvon Thibodeau, right? I mean, they've got some additions to the secondary. Paulson Adebo can go one-on-one with Terry McLaurin for a good portion of the day. And you've got Javon Holland to roam the free safety position. I think the Giants defense could be very, very good, and they could keep them in this game if they struggle on offense early because of the new addition of their quarterback, which likely will be Russell Wilson in week one. The offensive line does have chemistry, but it's not particularly very good. I think Andrew Thomas will be good to go, but they do have, the complete set of their receivers from last year. The running back position, they didn't do too much. They just added Cam Scatterboo, but he'll probably be a situational player. Tyrone Tracy will be the lead back. I think Brian Daboll will have a point to prove in this game, probably coming up with a pretty smart and crafty game plan for Russell Wilson in week 1. And Russ always has those moments where he keeps a team in the game because he doesn't turn it over. He makes explosive passes, even if it's a little bit hit and miss in terms of, we're going to go 3 and out and then we're going to hit a big play. Like, that's kind of the way the Giants are going to have to play with Russell Wilson. And he's probably going to take a couple sacks here. But I think the Giants could find a way to run the ball against the Commanders, a team that wasn't particularly good against the run last year. I think they can find matchups on the outside with Malik Neighbors, Darius Slayton, Wan'Dale Robinson. And I do feel like their defense will keep them in it because I don't think the Commanders will run the ball particularly well. They might take a little bit of time for Debo to get going in this offense and figure out how exactly they want to use them. And then also, I think the Giants defense just on paper is pretty talented. But ultimately, I could see this coming down to the last possession and the Commanders pulling it out because Jaden Daniels creates some magic. Once it's in 4th down mode, it's really difficult to stop this offense with all their short passing concepts and their screens in combination with Daniels' extension plays. It's really hard in those moments to stop them. So I think the Commanders win, but I think the Giants keep it close. I'm not going to lie. Then we have the Raiders at the Patriots here. This game is a total of 43.5, and the Patriots are favored by just 2.5 at home. I think these are two teams that the books don't quite know how to price yet. I think the Patriots are a team that will rise throughout the season, so I think you should be betting on them early in the year. At the same time, I think the Raiders might be a little bit overpriced to begin the year just because they do have Geno Smith, Pete Carroll, Chip Kelly, a lot of big names from the important positions. But when you look a little bit deeper at their roster, they do have quite a few holes. I think you could make arguments that their receiving core is a little just not explosive or impressive. I think you could make an argument their offensive line is average. And I think besides their defensive front, their linebackers, their safeties, their corners are pretty bad. So I think you look at the Patriots roster, and I think you could say, they have the better roster. They have less holes. They have a great combination of corners. They've improved their defensive front a ton, right? Their coaching staff is much better. Drake May could be better than Geno Smith this year. And then you look at their offense, and yes, the offensive line is going to be maybe a little bit of an issue early in the year because they're going to have a lot of new pieces, 2 or 3 new starters. But the receiving core, I think Diggs will be playing in this game. I think that a lot of their veterans will be ready to rock on offense, so I'm not too concerned, and especially with McDaniels, this is kind of a revenge game for him, and it's also in New England, it's not in Vegas. I think the Patriots win this game, and I think they cover this game. I think they win by about a touchdown. I don't think it will be pretty or anything, but I could see a 24-17, 27-20 type of victory, maybe a little bit lower scoring for this game, just because I think the defenses might be a little bit more prepared than the offenses because Chip Kelly is going to have to work with his offense. That being said, that's a bit of a wild card. Also, what will McDaniels bring with a year off from the NFL with Drake May maybe running the ball a little bit more and things like that? So there will be some things that you can't quite calculate about this game, but I just think the Patriots are the more talented team. I think that they have the better defense by a pretty long shot, and I also feel I just really like McDaniels with these pieces, and then Mike Vrabel with a point to prove at home in week 1. And I think Drake May just immediately is going to kick off this season in a big way. And I don't quite trust some of the areas of the Raiders roster right now. I just have a lot more feel and understanding of the Patriots roster from front to back. And the only real concern for me as a Patriots fan is their offensive line. I have concerns with the Raiders in a lot of different areas, including how does their offense really click in the passing game with a lack of explosiveness, maybe an over-reliance on Brock Bowers, Jacoby Myers. So I want to see how that works. Ashton Genty, though, the Patriots are going to have to slow him down in this game. I think this game, it will be tight, but I feel like the Patriots will ultimately be just the more talented team, and that's why I'll take them here to win and to cover. Next up, we've got the Cincinnati Bengals at the Cleveland Browns. The Bengals are favored by 5.5 on the road in Cleveland, okay? This is on the road in Cleveland. Total is 45.5. I'd probably lean towards the under here. I kind of like the Browns plus the points. It's hard for me not to take the Bengals, though, just because I have no idea who the quarterback of the Browns is. Like, if it's Joe Flacco, I actually might pick the Browns to win. Just based on, like, the Bengals have sucked in week one, like, every single year of Zach Taylor's tenure, and they're never the team that they are at the end of the year that they are at the beginning of the year. Like, they're never the same, despite the chemistry of the roster. Like, the Bengals offense should click immediately. Joe Burrow's also not coming off an injury, so they should be clicking immediately. That being said, the Browns defense has given them the most trouble out of any defense in the NFL, like, period, over the last few years, right? Because of their cornerbacks with, Denzel Ward, Emerson, and Newsome, and then because of their pass rush, right? And then you add Mason Graham to Myles Garrett, it gets pretty interesting in Cleveland. It's a rivalry game. Plus, if it's a mature quarterback like Flacco, he'll be able to execute this offense. And it's against a bad defense of the Bengals that's still trying to figure things out and put players into new positions and experiment. And it's a new defensive coordinator. So I could see an avenue for an upset. That being said, the decisive edge of Joe Burrow versus question mark quarterback is the reason I'll lean towards the Bengals as the winner. But I could see this as a 2017, 24-21 type of game. And ultimately, or even like 24-20, 21-17, like a 4-point game. So ultimately, I think the Bengals just squeak it out. Maybe even a 27-23, and it's a little bit higher scoring. But I think that they're not going to look great because they never really do in week one. But I think the chemistry offensively should take shape, at least in the second half. So I'll take Bengals to win, Browns to cover. The Browns keep this one close, typically. Next, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers at the Atlanta Falcons. Bucs are favored by 1.5 on the road in Atlanta. My first thought is take the Falcons, but at the same time, it's like, I don't really know what to expect from Penix. And I also really like the Bucs' experience in this game. The total is 48.5, and I understand why. Both defenses were not particularly great last year, but both defenses should see improvement this year, I would say. The Bucs and the Falcons had pretty good offenses last year. The Bucs were excellent. Now, the question is, how do the Bucs look without Liam Cohen in their first matchup? Now, what I love about the Bucs is they have a ton of chemistry offensively. I mean, they have both their running backs back, their tight end, Mike Evans, Chris Godwin. You add Emeka Ibuka. You have, a really solid, formidable front five of your offensive line that is back and starting together. So there's no concerns there. So ultimately, the personnel is very refined and detailed, and they're together. But the scheme is the question. The play calling is the question because Liam Cohen has left for Jacksonville. Defensively, Todd Bowles has all his marquee pieces that he's had for years, both in the secondary that should be healthy with Antoine Winfield, Jamel Dean, and then in the front with Vita Vea, Kalijah Kancey, Levante David, etc. So they have a lot of chemistry. The Falcons have some new pieces on their defense, especially their defensive front. And they also, have a young quarterback. So can the Falcons run the ball that well? This is one of the more difficult teams to run the ball against in Tampa Bay. That's going to be their bread and butter all season is Bijan Robinson. This will be a game that I think he struggles. So it's going to be up to Penix to be decisive, to be accurate, and to move the chains, which I'm not sure he'll do as well as Baker Mayfield. I don't know on Chris Godwin's status. That is a question. Atlanta did beat the Bucs twice last year, so that's something to take into account. Although the first game was a little fluky, and the second game, I do think the Bucs were pretty heavily injured, so I almost discount that game, but still, Falcons fans will make that argument, and they're also at home here. I just feel better about the Bucs. I just feel better about their quarterback. I feel better about their situation offensively. I feel better about the defense and their chemistry and their experience, and I almost think that the Falcons won't beat them 3 times in a row. So I kind of want to lean towards the Bucs here. They're the overall better team in my mind, and despite the recent matchups going in the Falcons' favor, I just have more questions about Atlanta. But you guys let me know in the comments if you have, a decisive edge for the Falcons. I wouldn't bet this game, but I would take the Bucs to win and to cover 1.5. This will likely be a last possession type of game. Next, the Carolina Panthers at Jacksonville. Carolina's getting 2.5 on the road. Jacksonville favored just slightly as the home favorite. The total is 46.5, which is pretty high. I guess I understand why, because both teams do look like they're going to have better offenses this year. They're both led by young offensive coaches, recent Tampa Bay offensive coordinators, actually. And then both teams had absolutely atrocious defenses. If I'm not mistaken, both of them were in the bottom 3 in the NFL last year in defense. So I kind of understand that. Maybe the over is a look in this game. This is one of those games I don't really know which way I would bet. I'm leaning towards Jacksonville because they're at home, because they have probably, in my mind, the slightly better quarterback. But I like Carolina's offensive line more than I like Jacksonville's. I am kind of wondering what Liam Cohen will look like. I'm going to talk this through because I might switch my pick, but this is kind of like my initial thought is I really am looking forward to Trevor Lawrence with Travis Hunter, Brian Thomas, and Liam Cohen calling plays. I also think he'll open up the running game a little bit. Carolina has a lot of new pieces on defense, including like a bunch of guys up front, like multiple draft picks. We'll see if they'll still make an addition there on the edge. But they have multiple defensive linemen that are going to be new. Derek Brown is returning, though. Their secondary is a little suspect outside of J.C. Horn and Trayvon Moehrig, who's also new. So Carolina's defense on paper is not exactly phenomenal, but they do have some new pieces. That might take some time to involve them and kind of understand what they're going to be in this defense for Evero. So Jacksonville might be able to take advantage of that. Jacksonville's defense does have a lot of chemistry. They're also at home here, but at the same time, they're not very impressive on paper. They don't have many new additions, but they're not very impressive. But they do have the better pass rush, I would say, just with Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. Eric Armstead, maybe, if he's healthy. But this is tough because, like, Carolina, how will T-Mac look? Like, the offensive line, I do like more. I think they'll keep Bryce protected in this game. Feel like Carolina can run the ball a little bit in this game. I just don't really know. I'm going to lean towards Jacksonville. It's going to be pretty simple. Like, they're slight favorites. They're at home. Slightly better quarterback. I like their coach a little bit more, although he's new. And Carolina just has a lot of new pieces on defense. So slightly Jacksonville, but man, I would stay far away from this game. There's so many questions about these two teams. Then next you have the Miami Dolphins at the Indianapolis Colts. The Dolphins are 1.5 point dogs on the road at Indianapolis. The total is 45.5. It's in a dome. Okay, let's think about it. So the Colts have the better line of scrimmage play. That's for certain. But the Dolphins have the better quarterback, and I do think the Dolphins have the better offense. The Dolphins also have a very solid pass rush, but their secondary is suspect. So I think a big question in this game will be how well do the Colts run the ball on the Dolphins? And that's going to be an area that I'm not quite sure how good the Dolphins will be on defense. They could be good. They could not be good. I'm not like 100% sure either way. Will Jalen Ramsey be there? Feels like he probably won't be. So at the same time, if there's a quarterback that the Dolphins want to play with a suspect secondary in week 1, it's Anthony Richardson. But what does Anthony Richardson exactly look like? This is another game I would not bet for my life. At the same time, Miami is usually good at the beginning of the year. Their offense is usually clicking. Mike McDaniel usually has some tricks up his sleeve. And Tyreek Hill will be fresh. Jalen Waddle will be healthy. Jonnu Smith, like all their weapons will be out there, which is going to be a challenge. They played last season. The Colts won, but that was without Tua, and I thought Miami was the better team. I'm going to take Miami just because I like Tua more than Richardson, and I like McDaniel entering the season with some fresh new tricks and a point to prove. And despite the Colts' advantage from a pass rush perspective, which might give the Dolphins some problems, I don't know if the Colts will be able to take advantage on the other side of the ball either. This is probably going to be a one-score game, field goal type of game. But I'm just going to lean towards the Dolphins because I just trust them a little bit more. I don't know. This is a game I would not bet. I would stay far away from this game. The Pittsburgh Steelers at the New York Jets. Steelers are favored by 3. This is in New York. I'm going to take the Steelers to win and to cover. The reason for that is this is a low total, 39.5. The reason for that is it's Mike Tomlin against a first-time head coach. Pretty simple. At the same time, the Steelers have a lot of chemistry on their offensive line and their defensive line, and their defense is awesome. So I think the Steelers' defense will travel. I think their pass rush will provide some problems for the young offensive line of the Jets and Justin Fields, and they know Justin Fields intimately well. Also, I think Aaron Rodgers will be the starting quarterback, which will give me confidence entering the season. But even if he isn't, I would still lean towards the Steelers. I think the Jets will just be disorganized from having a new coaching staff, and I don't particularly think they're very good. So, I mean, they don't have a lot of depth at playmaker. They just have a lot of questions to answer. I think the Steelers are the better team by more than 3 points. I think they win by I think it's like a suffocating victory, like 21-10, something like that, 21-13. So I'll take the Steelers here. Mike Tomlin all the way and Arthur Smith, two experienced guys against a fresh new coaching staff. Then we've got the Tennessee Titans at the Denver Broncos. Broncos favored by 7.5 in this game. That's quite a few points. But Tennessee, for good reason, is getting 7.5, and the total is 41.5 because they have a rookie quarterback. They don't have a ton of new things on their team, but there's a pretty big edge for the Broncos in this game. From a defense perspective, I mean, the Broncos defense was elite last year. They were one of the 3 best pass defenses in football, and they're taking on a rookie quarterback with a fresh new left tackle and kind of a new offensive line. And at the same time, it's Sean Payton versus Callahan. I mean, that is a huge edge, especially entering a season. The Broncos are the much more talented team. I think they're the better team at the line of scrimmage. I think they have the much more devastating defense and better pass rush. They're at home at Mile High, where it's hard to breathe at the beginning of the season and players aren't quite conditioned, and the Broncos have a huge edge in that regard. So I think everything points towards the Broncos to win and to cover. This feels like a convincing Denver victory. Hopefully Cam Ward shows well here, but there's a lot to ask of him with a very limited receiving core that really only features Calvin Ridley, and Calvin Ridley will be shadowed by Pat Surtain. So, I mean, that's really difficult. So, yeah, this is a really tough ask for Cam Ward. This is one of the worst matchups in football in week 1. Denver is really hard to go in and win in week 1. So, I'm going to take the Broncos to win this game and to cover. Then we have the San Francisco 49ers at the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle. I was at this game last year. It was on Thursday night. It was relatively early in the season. I like the 49ers to win and to cover. Seattle has some questions on offense, some chemistry questions. Cooper Kupp involved in this offense, a new offensive coordinator, a new quarterback, and a new set of offensive linemen. So there's a lot of questions there. The Niners do have a lot of new defensive players, but at the same time, Robert Saleh's defense is very simple to understand, and they can play fast and they can play physical. I don't think it will be too much, and I also just count on Robert Saleh to have his guys ready. At the same time, Shanahan has pretty much all his playmakers fresh, healthy. McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk should be back, and Brock Purdy is going to be probably at his best, the best Brock Purdy we've ever seen, with another offseason to prepare his mind for this offense and everything they're going to ask. I think Seattle's defense is pretty solid and pretty talented, and I don't have too many concerns there. But at the same time, the Niners have done a pretty good job at moving the football against them in recent outings. I know Seattle has been difficult to play in, but not last year. Seattle was pretty easy, actually, to go in and get a victory against. So I think the problems of the Seattle offensive line, the Seattle lack of chemistry offensively, and the new offensive coordinator against a team that has a very good coaching staff and although some new players on the offensive and defensive lines, I feel like the Niners just are the better team, and they're going to go into Seattle and win again. I don't think it will be a blowout, but I would say like 27-20 for San Francisco, 24-17, something in that range. I think San Francisco will win this game. Then we have the Detroit Lions at the Green Bay Packers. Detroit is favored by 1.5 in Green Bay. This is an interesting game. The total is 49.5. I think I'd lean towards the over, but that's a high total for week 1. This is interesting. So the Lions obviously are having to adjust to a new offensive coordinator, a new defensive coordinator, but their roster has a lot of chemistry. Both teams actually have a lot of chemistry. Like from a pure production and like play quality style standpoint, this should be a very good football game. Like for a week 1 standard, because both of these teams have a lot of chemistry and a lot of the same pieces as last year, right? They also have the same quarterbacks, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, right? A lot of the same playmakers. I don't think Christian Watson will be playing, but Matthew Golden will be involved for the Packers. And that is a question, how, effective will he be? So I think I'm going to go with Detroit because they have recently mostly won these games, and it's mostly had to do with the line of scrimmage. I mean, the Lions have had the better play at the line of scrimmage. That being said, Okay, let's think about this. Aleem McNeil is probably out for this game. The Lions do have a new guard starting, so that's something. The Packers also have a new guard starting in Aaron Banks, but I mean, that's not, he's a professional. I don't think that's a huge deal. Their defensive front is the same, but the Packers pass rush is not very good. Also, Aiden Hutchinson is returning from injury. Will he be 100% like ready to rock? I think so. I mean, you never know. He might have some rust, but yeah, this is tough. I don't know if the Packers truly will know. I think they could run the ball on the Lions a little bit in this game, a little bit more without McNeil. But that being said, the Lions have been tough to run on, and that's given the Packers issues because their drop back passing game, especially with a rookie being expected to be their number one receiver, that's not ideal, right? The Lions could probably lean into playing their man feisty coverage and not have too many fits or issues there. And then at the same time, the Lions have a lot of chemistry on offense. I don't really trust the Packers secondary, especially if they do trade Alexander. I'm going to lean towards the Lions. I think they're slightly more talented and a slightly more, like, they just kind of, I think their identity will be more firm to enter the season than the Packers. So I'm going to lean towards that direction. This is an interesting game. I'll have to dive more into this one, but I trust Jared Goff and that Lions offense to find a way to produce with, you know, the chemistry they have with Amon-Ra, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery, Jameson Williams, most of the offensive line remaining the same. Even if the play caller is different, I feel like they have enough chemistry there to put up close to 30 points on this middling Packer defense. At the same time, I just think the Lions defense will make a couple more stops due to their aggressive style than I feel like the Packers will. So it's also really not going to be that windy, rainy, bad weather, which is, this sucks for the Packers because they would rather play the Lions later in the year because of that. But to me, I think the Lions will be more equipped to play in a sunny Lambeau than they would be in a windy Lambeau because of Jared Goff. So I'll take the Lions here. Then we have the Houston Texans and the LA Rams, which is one of the more random week one matchups in my opinion. The Texans are getting 2.5 on the road at the Rams. I am going to lean towards the Rams, and the reason is that the Texans' offensive line gives me a lot of questions, and the Rams have an excellent pass rush, and they're at home. And bad offensive lines, I always say they don't travel well. I think Stroud could be struggling here. If the Texans' offensive line comes into this game and they play well, that is going to be a great sign for Texans fans for the rest of the season. I also wouldn't react too much I wouldn't overreact if they do struggle here, just because of how effective the Rams pass rush was late last season with their young ballers. Also, the Texans are adjusting to a new offensive coordinator. The Rams are not adjusting to new coaches. If anything, they have a ton of chemistry on both sides. They have an experienced quarterback, right? They should be healthy, and it's Sean McVay. So, yeah, the Rams I would take to win and to cover. The Texans defense, though, is really tough, and they'll keep them in this game. This should be very competitive, but I just don't know if the Texans offense will have enough because I think the Rams pass rush will give them a lot of problems in week one. Then we have Sunday Night Football, the Ravens and the Bills. 1.5, the Bills are favored. Actually, currently at the sportsbook that I use most frequently, it is actually not even available right now, but I saw 1.5. This is interesting. I want to pick the Bills, but something inside is telling me to take the Ravens. So let's break this down. So first of all, we have two incredible quarterbacks. We do have the Bills Mafia at home in a primetime spot, which is like, that's a lot. Okay, it's going to be loud. The Ravens have a lot of chemistry on both sides. They didn't really lose many players. Their offensive line in Buffalo in week one in this setting might be a little bit of a problem. That's kind of the area that I think people will gloss over, where the Bills might be able to get some pressure. They might be able to force some penalties. There might be some mistakes by the Ravens that people aren't quite accounting for. At the same time, they should have Zay Flowers back, right? They didn't have him in that playoff game. DeAndre Hopkins will be healthy to start the year. And then they'll have all their weapons. Henry fresh for the season, right? The Bills, they have new additions to their secondary. They have new additions to their front. They have a couple guys that will be suspended on the defensive front from a depth purpose at the beginning of the year that will help them against the run later in the year. The Bills, just struggled a lot to really contain the Ravens in both games, in my opinion, besides like a couple mistakes by the Ravens in the playoff game. It also won't be cold, you wouldn't think, which should help the Ravens more than Buffalo. On the other side, the Ravens defense is probably going to be closer to the defense it was at the end of the year than it was at the beginning of the year. But the Bills, from an offensive standpoint, they're hard to stop. Josh running, understanding that the Bills, this is a big game, like for a seeding thing. Like this is, even though it's week 1, it's going to matter in the playoff seeding at the end of the year. As long as both quarterbacks are healthy the entire season, they're going to make the playoffs. The offensive line of Buffalo, I trust more. I also feel like the Bills do have more chemistry from like a playmaker standpoint than they've had in recent years entering the season. And I do think their offensive line can really give Allen a lot of time. This is tough, man. I think the Ravens are a little bit more talented, but the way that McDermott does scheme for Lamar is typically pretty effective. And at the same time, they're at home. And that's just a big deal in week 1 because of all the mistakes that the away team has to deal with in Sunday Night Football in that atmosphere. I'm going to take the Bills by 3, but I don't know. I mean, the Ravens could easily win this game if they can get their ground game going, and that will take the pressure off the offensive line and Lamar. And Zay could be a problem, but that being said, Maxwell Hairston is the type of guy that you want to match up with him. So I'm going to go Bills like 27-24, but I don't know. I'll just take the home team. Both teams are going to be, honestly, guys, this is like my AFC championship right now. So this is going to be a really good game. And then Monday Night Football, Minnesota at Chicago. Chicago's favored by 1.5. Minnesota has a new quarterback while Chicago has a lot of new pieces. Minnesota does too. Like Minnesota has like 3 new starters on the offensive line, specifically the interior. And they also have 2 or 3 new starters on defense. Maybe even more, 4 or 5. So like a couple in the secondary, a couple up front. So there are a lot of new pieces. This game's also in Chicago, and it's going to be the first game that J.J. McCarthy plays on the road in the NFL. That being said, he did play at Michigan, so he should have experience with crowd noise and things like that, but it could be awkward. It's not the Dome, okay? Also, how does J.J. look with these playmakers? How does Ben Johnson look with this offense, and how does Dennis Allen's defense come together? Something's telling me Chicago. I don't really know. I don't really know why. There's not a lot of math or science to this. I'm not going to lie. Okay, so let's think about it. Now, Flores is going to be a problem for Caleb, but Ben Johnson has had his offenses very prepared for Brian Flores. Ben Johnson has out-play called Brian Flores. So keep that in mind. The offensive line of Chicago, this is going to be a test right away. But at the same time, I trust guys like Joe Thuney and Drew Dahlman, and these guys are experienced. And Ben Johnson could be very crafty in this game. I mean, we could see a lot of cool shit. And Caleb could have some easy throws. And if Caleb is comfortable, he could make some plays. Defensively, Chicago has a lot of chemistry. That matters. They're at home against a rookie, essentially. So yeah, I'll lean towards Chicago to win. Just because I think one quarterback has a little bit more experience. And I do like the Ben Johnson versus Brian Flores matchup overall. But that being said, I wouldn't rule out the Vikings winning this game. Yeah, this should be a really good game. This is another questionable, I don't know what's going to happen type of vibe. So there it is, guys. My early week 1 2025 NFL picks and predictions. If you enjoyed, Gronk, spike the like button. And don't be a jabroni. Subscribe for more NFL picks, bets, and everything else all off season long. Peace.